Christina ended up in the capital by her mother's will. They were living in a semi-abandoned village at the time. One day, a young man, a relative from the capital, visited their acquaintances. Having heard the hosts rave about the guest's life in the distant place, Mrs. Nina became enamored with the idea that her daughter must live just as vividly and richly. To start, she gathered with her to those acquaintances. "Let's take some apples to the grandmother. The basket is heavy. Will you help carry it?" "Why does she need our apples?" "She has her own," the daughter was surprised. "Ours are better, and don't argue when I'm speaking seriously. Better be more talkative there. Anatoly is a single man. With his own place. What a husband he would make for you." "Yeah, right," snorted the willful girl, "I don't need any husband." "Foolish girl. You'll just stay here, cooing alone among the old ladies. In the whole area, there's only one fool, and even he's lame, of the young ones available." The meeting happened, but no spark flew between the capital man and Christina. "Well, you don't like him at all?" the mother was surprised. "He's got a good figure and is not bad looking." "Exactly, not bad, but also not good. Nothing special. I don't need him. And if you really want to get rid of me that badly, I can go alone." "And where would you go alone?" "Who needs you there?" Grania said, "Without a capital registration. You won't find work, and there'll be nowhere to live. No, you need to be under supervision." And Mrs. Nina, having persuaded Grania, together they talked to the capital guest about their plan. He was reluctant at first. "I don't want to," he said, "put a yoke on my neck yet." But after promises to give a dowry from the money saved while her husband was still alive, he thought it over and, calculating something in his mind, agreed. That settled it. They decided to marry the young ones in the capital. Therefore, Mrs. Nina announced that she would personally accompany Christina. "She's not an orphan to me," she explained. "A mother's daughter, so I'll oversee everything myself, to ensure she's not wronged. And everything will be done honorably. Then I'll trust her to her lawful husband." Upon arrival, it became clear why the groom was so agreeable. The house he lived in was soon to be demolished. Anatoly realized that having a wife would allow him to get an apartment instead of his room in this case. He agreed to the presence of his mother-in-law until the wedding. And to make everything decent, he housed her and her daughter in his room, moving temporarily to his parents' apartment. When the young couple got married, Mrs. Nina sighed with relief and started to prepare for her journey home. "Dear matchmaker, and you, Anatoly," she advised the new relatives. "I leave my daughter in your care. Don't mistreat her, my darling. Look after her, she's still so young." The woman handed her son-in-law the promised sum and departed for her homeland with a sense of duty fulfilled. The young couple agreed not to meddle in each other's affairs, to maintain distance, and to live, since it had come to that, as landlord and tenant, dividing the room in half with a screen. On one side, Anatoly slept on a sofa. On the other side of the screen, on a fold-out bed, was Christina. "Once I get the apartment, we'll divorce. And so be it. I'll give you half of the dowry money I received." The husband generously promised in a gentlemanly fashion. "And then we'll go our separate ways." And so they lived. Very close, yet apart. They lived their days separately, but enjoyed the bonds of their marriage. Anatoly was successful with women and fully took advantage of this, but he was fickle. And when his frequently changing girlfriends refused to accept a breakup and started to make a scene or, worse, cry, he always had a solid argument in reserve. "I'm married," he would declare with a look of dismay, after which most of the scandalous women exploded with offended feelings and disappeared forever. As for those who were not deterred by this admission, Christina had to deal with them. It must be acknowledged that she did this masterfully. She could find the right approach to any rival, find such words that immediately cooled feelings and discouraged any desire to see her or her husband again. In turn, Anatoly helped to fend off particularly persistent admirers from his tenant and, incidentally, wife. Both were satisfied with this arrangement. They became friends and always acted in concert. They also dealt with household problems together, and to an outsider, it might even seem that they were an exemplary family. Such were the friendly and smooth relations between them. To all those around them, they were indeed a family, with shared leisure and entertainments. In the summer, they would go out to nature with mutual friends. They often visited Mrs. Nina in the village. In winter, they went skiing and ice skating. Anatoly's mother, Mrs. Vera, never commented on her son's family life, but secretly hoped that their friendship would blossom into something more. During meetings with Mrs. Nina, both lamented that their children were still young and foolish, not realizing they were meant for each other. Fearful of disrupting what they had, they agreed not to push the spouses towards one another, behaving as though there were no calculations between them. Both mothers tried to add warmth and affection to the young couple's relationship, subtly emphasizing their happiness in seeing such harmony and unity of views. The demolition of the house was significantly delayed. Several years passed, and it was continually postponed. The spouses were not too troubled by this, as they were satisfied with their current situation. But then, Christina fell in love. Sergei was curly-haired with mischievous eyes, spontaneous, romantic, and cheerful. He courted her beautifully, persistently won her affection, but soon grew cold and bored. With him, Christina felt fun and interested, yet she couldn't shake off a feeling of instability, as if everything happening to her could dissolve into a mirage at any moment. Her intuition did not deceive her. When she told her beloved about her pregnancy, the cheerful romantic turned into a cruel, judgmental cynic. "What do I need you and your child for?" he shouted, squinting angrily. "You have nothing, no place of your own. Where do you plan to live? Here? With me in a dorm? Don't even hope. I need an apartment, understand? Diapers are the last thing I need." Anatoly found Christina on a bench near that very dormitory. It was deep into the night, yet she sat there, petrified with grief. She couldn't and didn't want to believe what had happened. It seemed like a bad joke. Now Sergei would realize she was truly suffering, would come out, beg for forgiveness, and say entirely different words that would change everything for the better. "Let's go home," her husband sat down next to her. "You're shivering, you'll catch a cold." "No," she shook her head. "I can't. I'm unwanted by anyone with my child. Only he needs me, understand? And he will still be. He's alive, and he will love me. Not like his father, the traitor." "You are needed by me," Anatoly interrupted her. "You and the child. Both of you are needed by me. This is my wife's child, and he will carry my surname. Let's go, it's high time we all went to sleep." The fictitious spouses tried to hide the story of Christina's pregnancy from their mothers, but they quickly guessed the true state of affairs. Mrs. Nina appreciated her son-in-law's deed and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Ultimately, she would have been happier with this outcome, even though it resulted from an unsightly situation. The mother scolded her daughter for recklessness, which could have led to much worse consequences had there not been a real man by her side. "You finally need to appreciate him," she explained. "You're just lucky. Understand that good treatment and reliability are far more important in family life than the fleeting whim of a pretty boy." "Yes, I get it, Mom," Christina replied irritably. "I understood it all without your moralizing. Since it all happened this way, so be it. Especially since I like Anatoly too. Only I don't know if he will ever forgive me." Mrs. Vera was hurt in her finest feelings. It was painful for her son, and the daughter-in-law seemed no longer so desirable with another man's child brought to her lawful husband. However, accepting Anatoly's decision, she resigned herself to the fact that had already occurred. After all, she couldn't change anything anyway. So, with a heavy heart, she started helping Christina prepare for childbirth. By the time the grandson was born, she had already come to terms with the thought that he was her own and her son's as well. Especially since they named him Mikhail, after her father. The grandmother even involuntarily searched for familiar features in the wrinkled little face, and, to everyone's astonishment, found them. The young parents united in the common chores around the baby. The new status gave them an emotional boost. Sleepless nights eventually ended with them waking up after the most scream-filled and exhausting night together. Upon awakening, Anatoly found himself tenderly hugging his wife along with the baby. Christina, trustingly pressing her cheek to his hand, slept curled up next to her son. Thus, their honeymoon coincided with Mikhail's infancy. It wasn't without difficulties that accompany every family with a young child. Many of them were smoothed over thanks to Vera's delicate help, who was always there. Her patience and unobtrusive advice helped navigate the sharpest corners in the spouse's relationship. The daughter-in-law appreciated her kindness and participation, sometimes sharing things she didn't want to tell her own mother, who was more blunt in judging her daughter and didn't always restrain her emotions, criticizing her actions. Mrs. Nina sometimes even felt jealous of her daughter's relationship with her mother-in-law because they communicated like two friends, just of different ages. Such trusting relationships had never existed between her and her own mother. She was more of a strict boss who didn't tolerate objections. Perhaps that's why Christina first opened up to Mrs. Vera when she accidentally saw Sergei during a walk in the park. He was with another girl, and he was so attentive to her. She spoke nervously. "But I know what his courtship is worth. Do you think I should have opened her eyes to this monster?" "It's not worth it, honey," the woman answered. "It's her life, and she's unlikely to believe you. She'll just think you're seeking revenge and want your ex back." "Nothing like that. How could you think such a thing when Anatoly is by my side? With whom he can't even compare? I don't need anyone, including Sergei. Still, it's better for you not to show yourself to him, just to be safe," Mrs. Vera advised. "He's a bad person, and he could harm your family." She told no one about this conversation, asking Christina to also keep silent. She feared that Sergei's appearance could destroy the carefully built life of the young family. "Ah, it's a pity we didn't manage to have a second child," Anatoly lamented when he learned that their house would soon be resettled. Everyone had stopped believing it would happen. "We were caught off guard." "Well, it's okay, we're still young. We can catch up. Right?" He turned to a thoughtful Christina. "What?" she started. "Oh, yes, of course." Anatoly was excitedly thrilled by the news he heard but nevertheless noticed his wife's subdued mood and silence. Then, amid the constant chores, the hustle and bustle of packing and moving, he forgot about it, especially since there was no time to ponder. Once they settled into their new spacious apartment and the emotions from the changes subsided a bit, the man again noticed how sad and pale Christina was. Now he had become worried and decided to find out the reason himself, as she would only say that she was tired when asked directly. However, he didn't have to investigate because soon he accidentally saw his wife walking on the street with their son. Sergei was with them. Everything clicked in his mind at that moment. Boiling with anger, he turned around sharply and nearly ran away. When Christina returned home, she found a note on the table. It read, "I saw you two together and I know everything. Once, he left you because you had no place to live. Now, nothing is stopping you from being together. I will not stand in the way of your happiness. I am going to my mother's. The apartment is yours. You will now have a beloved husband, and Mikhail will have his real father. Be happy." The woman grabbed her phone. "Mrs. Vera, please help. Save my marriage. Come over. I need to talk to you." Soon, the mother-in-law appeared to find her in tears. Christina rushed to her with the paper in her hands. "Here, read this. You didn't listen to me after all." Reading the text, the mother-in-law sighed in disappointment. "Forgive me, but it's not at all as Anatoly has imagined. You see, I didn't want to, but then I met Elena by chance, got to know her, became friends. Some time later, I decided to tell her about myself, so she wouldn't trust Sergei. I just wanted to warn her so she wouldn't make my mistake. But she, as you said, thought I wanted to turn them against each other, started to make a scene, screaming that she wouldn't give him to me. So, I eventually said that I don't need anyone because I'm very happy with my husband. He's a good father to Mikhail and loves him very much. And that we're going to have a baby soon. You're pregnant? Yes, Christina nodded resignedly. Does Anatoly know? No. I'm now afraid to tell him because that same day, Sergei ambushed me and demanded that I confess to Elena that I lied out of jealousy. And if I don't agree, and because of me, he loses a wealthy bride, he would tell Anatoly that the child is his, and that I've been cheating on him all these years. But it's not true. I really love your son very much. It just so happened that Sergei found out about my pregnancy first. Elena told him everything. And now Anatoly won't believe me at all. He won't even want to talk to me. But he will listen to you. Tell him how it all was. No one else but you can help me. After calming her daughter-in-law, Mrs. Vera left. A couple of hours later, the police called to report that Anatoly had been detained for fighting with Sergei. Near the station, Christina met both her mother-in-law and Elena. Together, the women managed to resolve the situation. The released Anatoly rushed to his wife, hugged her, and asked, "Who will it be?" "I don't know yet," Christina replied, puzzled. "Well, it doesn't matter. Right, Mom?" Anatoly turned to Mrs. Vera. "Of course," she smiled. "The main thing is that you love each other, and now you'll have 2 children to love. To love. To love."